Thank you very much. It feels a little bit like deja vu because I'm sure there's people that have been sat in this room maybe last month for a provider engagement event and possibly have seen me before. Just to let you know, I'm not going to do the same thing. You're not going to see it all over again, something different. First of all, I need to apologise that I'm not Walter Lloyd-Smith. I know you're all really looking forward to seeing Walter talking about safeguarding. Unfortunately, he's been unable to make it today. But I am going to cover some of the stuff that he would have covered, and that's because I also sit on the Safeguarding Adults board, so I can talk with some knowledge about some of the stuff that he was talked about as well today, so I'm going to run through that. I should introduce myself really, for those that haven't met me before. My name is Tim Weller, I'm Head of Quality Assurance. I'm covering the bit of the job that Steve Holland did until December, relating to quality assurance. He still has the remit for market development in the council, but his big piece is on STP, which is what Lucy would have been talking about today, but you'll get next time. But it's much better coming from Lucy than it is from Steve, let me tell you. So that'll be something to look forward to for next time. The bit that I'm going to do is on quality assurance, and that's the bit that I'm going to continue to do until September, at least for the moment. It could be that if Steve's bit on STP continues beyond that, then I'll continue as well, and that'd be a good thing. Because I've started off lots of really positive work and engagement at the moment. It'd be really good to see that past the other end of September as well. So I'm going to talk about some of that today. That's me. I've also been asked to tell you a bit about me as well. So my background is as a social worker primarily. I'm also a non-practicing barrister. I spent time working as a consultant immediately before coming to council, turning around care services. So I've made a couple of inadequate services good, one outstanding, which is great. Really happy for them. I've also spent a lot of my career with the Care Quality Commission, a big proportion of it actually. I was heading up the enforcement function nationally up until 2 years ago. So that's kind of just sort of a nutshell about me, so you know where I am. I've also worked directly with providers as well. So as a provider, operationally managing a number of services, residential services, some supported living services, and a bit of domiciliary care as well tucked in there somewhere. So that's kind of a bit about me and where I come from. At the moment, heading up the quality assurance team to the council. I'm going the wrong way then. I'll hit the right button. No. Yeah. So the bit that Walter would have been talking about now relates to safeguarding adult reviews. So there's been two fairly major safeguarding adult reviews that are ongoing at the moment. The last one, which is SAR-E, which is the one that's the most recently published report, relates to a residential care service. This is the one, if you don't remember it, I'll refresh you. This is the one, SAR-E that is, where the home went cold, the boiler broke down, and a number of agencies were engaged with that care provider. There was an accident as a consequence of the boiler going down, and there were significant lessons to be learned from the safeguarding adult review that came about as a consequence of that incident. That report is published. It's out on our website, on the NCC website. If you haven't looked at it, then that's okay. It's a big report, so I wouldn't expect you to find the time in the day to do that. So what I'm going to do for you is make it even easier. Walter's asked me to write a 7-minute briefing, which is also published on the Safeguarding Adults part of the Norfolk website, which you'll be able to find. And that I think I promised him that I'd finish that by Brexit. So now I've got a bit more time. I think I will try to get it done by next week actually, because I'm nearly there, so you should have that. So that will be a synopsis that in 7 minutes, theoretically, you can read about all the highlights that are particularly relevant to you if you are a provider of a residential service, because SAR-E was really about what went wrong in that service and some lessons to be learned. And there's lessons for providers, there's lessons for the statutory agencies, for CQC and various other parties as well that were engaged there, including the doctor's surgery and a number of people that you wouldn't necessarily think that could have done something that wouldn't have made that quite the issue that it became. So that's about SAR-E, so that's not the one that's up here. The next two, which are the current ones, the current SARs that are being investigated at the moment. In fact, they're both in the report writing stage. So I'm able to give you sort of potted headlines in advance of the report even being drafted. because I sit on those boards. They both involve residential services, both actually nursing and residential, so they're both relevant to you if you're a provider of nursing or residential services. And I'm just going to give you sort of a brief synopsis of what the key findings are in relation to them, because I don't want to preempt the report. It is important not to do that, but I can give you some highlights. So one of the key highlights that actually impact on both of these SARs are about the inadequacy of a decent pre-admission assessment. I recognise that the people in the room here today are probably services that are compliant and doing fantastic pre-admission assessments already, but there will be some learnings come out of this about some areas that maybe even a good provider, and the provider that is referred to in these SARs was a provider that was rated good by CQC, but still missed out a few things in their pre-admission assessment. So one of them was around making inquiries into the history of the person that they were intending to admit to their home. So their admission form that they used as a standard didn't include things like, had the person ever been subject to detention under the Mental Health Act? You kind of make these assumptions probably that either somebody is, if you're going to assess them in a psychiatric type psychiatric type environment like a hospital, for example, you make an assumption that possibly somebody has a psychiatric or forensic history. But if you're going to do your assessment in a general hospital or in another setting that isn't necessarily forensic, it might not occur to you to think about, does somebody have a mental health condition, or have they ever been previously detained under the Mental Health Act? It's not something that people automatically think of, but it is something that's relevant. So one of the recommendations that comes out of this side will be that there is consideration of that matter. It will help you to form a holistic care plan that takes into account of somebody's previous mental health condition, if they have one, and also potentially prepare you for behaviours that might present themselves again in older age, because that's something that also happens for people who may have a history, even if it's a long time ago with mental health. So it's just one factor to consider. Another bit, which is kind of news for me, because I'm learning as well in this one, I'm not absolutely certain how health works. I've kind of just realised as a consequence of this that I'm quite familiar with the discharge to assess process, because it's kind of a bit social workery and kind of a little bit sort of healthy as well. So I'm sure that if you've made admissions, if you run nursing or residential services, you've made potentially admissions on that basis. They're not quite admissions at that point, but you're effectively acting as a ward in the community, a bit of the hospital out there while somebody's being assessed. So you're probably familiar with that, but are you familiar with somebody that might have been discharged from a psychiatric hospital that's no longer, and possibly never was, under section while they were there, about admitting them to your home? Because the process is actually, it looks the same, it smells the same, legally it's different, and it's funded differently. Now, I didn't know that until this SAR. And one of the protections of a discharge from a psychiatric hospital, or psychiatric setting, even if it's not a hospital, is that there's some protection from you as a new provider. If you decide that that admission is sound and safe and is somebody that you can admit, there's protection for you in that a bed will remain available to that person in the psychiatric setting should the placement not work for you. And that's quite an important thing that the provider in this case didn't know, and so it's likely that, okay, this was a good provider rated by CQC, they had good knowledge, they could have good knowledge, they did have good knowledge, but this information wasn't known to them. So there'll be a bit coming out of this SAR that will draw your attention to that as well, to make you aware of it. Again, it's linked to both of these SARs as well. It's about how to manage in a crisis when you've got behaviour that challenges. If you run or manage a service for people with dementia or people who have behaviours that challenge your service, then you'll already be familiar with the best way to manage those behaviours and who to engage with. But here's a care home that we're talking about that was rated good, staff that knew what they were doing, they were all trained, managers that were in control of the situation, but very quickly became out of control with a situation where somebody's behaviour just crossed the threshold of stuff that they felt comfortable with. And that can happen really quite quickly, even with the best support going in, probably all seen it. I can see some nods, so I know there's people that are empathising with that situation. You can have people whose needs can become all of a sudden really quite quickly outside of the scope of the skill set within your staff team, without the knowledge set of yourselves as managers and owners of services as well. So what was missing when this incident happened was a really clear framework, so that providers were really clear about what support mechanisms were there, how to access those support mechanisms, and also to have some clarity about the timescales involved, so that they can hold statutory agencies to account in terms of not just saying, look, I'm going to give notice to this person because we simply can't manage them anymore, but to do that in a much more strategic way, in a more measured way, to get better outcomes for people, but also so that you can be clear about what your expectations are of the agencies that are there to support you. So all of those things were in place, but they just weren't known about at the time of this. So we think that there's possibly a piece of work to do to articulate that more clearly and to make it more available to providers so that they feel supported by the mechanisms that do exist. And that's all covered within that, believe it or not. Commissioning placements is something that sort of strategic wide for the council in terms of identifying particular providers who have specialisms in particular areas of care, and this is something that the council needs to be better at. I think the council's probably all right at it, but it definitely needs to be better at it in terms of identifying the right places for people to go to, and that's something that our social work teams are going to receive some input on as a consequence of this SAR as well. Particularly in relation to a social worker being the key care manager of a person and continuing to be a care manager of a person after somebody has been admitted to your service, because there's a bit of a danger, and we know it's because council's very resource stretched in terms of reviews that you've probably never seen happen after a year. We know that they're out there, we know there's a backlog, but particularly at the point where somebody's just been admitted to your home, it's really important that there's a continued care management function from the council, so that they can look at how you're providing the care, support you to do it well, look after the interests of the person, because there's been a tendency for, once that placement's been made, great, that's that person looked after, now I've got another 36 to try and place. And I think that whilst that's a real pressure on our social work colleagues, they need to change their focus just a little bit to support you better, but more particularly to support the people that they're placing better as well through that process. It's more of a transition rather than a single point of entry, single point of exit as soon as that person's been placed with you. And another thing that's a recurring theme through both of these SARs, and it's really quite alarming because there was quite a lot of work done, I understand, before I came to Norfolk in terms of information to providers and others about the Mental Capacity Act and assessments under the Mental Capacity Act. And dolls, dare I even mention dolls? I don't know, I feel like somebody could find me down really easily if I start talking about dolls here, because I know you do make the applications. But it's a recurring theme through both of these SARs that there was a failure on part of the provider, who I should remind you was rated good, the staff were good, the manager was good, but there was a failure on behalf of the home itself to conduct its own mental capacity assessments of individuals, not just the persons that were involved in this SAR, but the people around them as well, because their impact on somebody's behaviour on others, and sometimes mental capacity needs to be taken into consideration in respect of people around the person that's of concern as well. And it's sort of signally missing. It's really, really easy to see it when you're looking at a case retrospectively. All of us around the table from multidisciplinary sort of background could immediately see that many of us were saying, thinking about saying, well, why on earth didn't they do a mental capacity assessment here? That would have picked up something that would have led to a trigger that would have helped to sort this out much more quickly earlier on than it was. And the same applies to best interest as well. That best interest assessments are things that are often need to be triggered by providers, because you're the people that are at the front line with the people whose interests need to be protected. And their rights to be preserved. So there's a piece missing about that as well. Like I say, it's really easy to see in retrospect. I'm not sitting as judge on this panel. What we're trying to do is we're trying to bring out learning that we can then share with providers, so they don't fall into the same traps. particularly because, and it's really, really relevant to note that this provider was good, the staff were good, the manager was good, and they were, important to note, really heavily engaged in this SAR process. So it's about learning, it's not about punishment, it's about, hopefully, protecting the way for people going forward in the future and giving you some good tips and things to look out for to prevent yourself being part of the SAR. But you know what, if you're ever part of the SAR, it's a friendly place, you don't need to be scared of it, it's about learning. So there's some learning from that. I think that's pretty much what Walter was going to talk about, but he would have spent longer to do it because obviously it's his baby, it's his passion. I'm sure we'll come back to another occasion and speak to you a bit more about safeguarding because he's really expert on that and I'm not. This is the only slide that if you had been at one of the provider engagement events, you will have seen before, and I have to tell you about it because it is a piece of work that's kind of quite key for my team. So it's to tell you about our key priorities with my little under-resourced team in the council. We're focusing on work which is completely wrong as far as a quality assurance perspective is concerned. If the council was genuinely doing quality assurance, then we would be quality assuring every service in the council that we commission, of which there's a huge number, and we don't have the resource to be able to do that, but that's what proper quality assurance would look like. It would be looking at every single service that we commission, having a view as to its quality in terms of its meeting the framework agreements or spot purchasing agreements that we have with providers when we're spending public money, but we're not doing that because we're simply not resourced to be able to do it. There's no secrets about that. So what we have to do is we have to sort of drive our resources into the bits that we feel that that most need them, and for us that means we're focusing our attention on providers that are rated by CQC as inadequate or requires improvement. There's a strategic element to this, so I'm going to just briefly outline that strategic element because I know that people in the room aren't really interested in that because you're all good or outstanding, so I'm speaking to the converted here, but I need to tell you about it because you need to be aware of it. So the work that we do with providers that are rated inadequate or in special measures are required by law, so we have to do that. Council has an obligation under the Care Act and other legislation to work with providers that are failing, as do other statutory agencies. And that has a twofold function. One, to support them into compliance, or as is becoming the trend in Norfolk, which is probably long overdue, it's about reviewing our onward arrangements with providers who don't have the capacity to achieve compliance. And that is a relatively new thing for Norfolk. It's new for Norfolk. And I know because I did it last month, it was in the paper, so if you want to find out about it, you can go and have a look. It's a home in Highfield, that had never been, home in Cromer, sorry, it is Highfield. And it's more than public now, that this is a home that has never been compliant since rating started. In fact, it wasn't compliant before rating started either, and yet the council was commissioning with it. And probably everybody in this room would recognise that if it was your money that was being spent on it, which it is, then you wouldn't be wanting to fund poor quality care. It's not in anybody's interest, it's not in the public interest, and as custodians of public money, that's not something that should happen. So it wasn't just done overnight, we give the provider an opportunity to improve, but at very short notice we kind of said, no, actually enough's enough, it's not safe, we're going to withdraw the contract. So CQC didn't shut it down, and that's the first time that's ever happened, because usually CQC have been ahead of the council in taking action to cancel registration, but this was the council's action, this is what we'll do. That doesn't apply to anybody in the room, hopefully. Hopefully never will. But that's just to tell you that piece of work that we're doing. It is quite cutting edge for Norfolk at the moment. It's not been done before, but that's what we're going to continue to do. That will help us to improve the overall market. Let me tell you about a really positive outcome that came about as a consequence. There's actually a number of positive outcomes. One, we took away the contract from a provider who should never have been commissioned. But another thing is that many relatives, after a relatives event that we had to explain what we were doing, said, well, do you know what, that's a massive relief to us. You kind of think, well, why did you not say something sooner then? Because we hadn't had lots of negative feedback from relatives about the way this service was run. But they were actually quite relieved that the council was doing something proactive to make better arrangements for people that were living in that service. And they've all moved on successfully to other services that are making a much better job of it. That's one positive thing. But the second, and I think probably strategically more interestingly positive bit that came out of it, was that the staff working in this home, who on the whole weren't bad, they were actually just poorly managed. They've moved to services in their area to supplement what was actually in that area a significant shortfall in staffing. So there's been a knock-on really positive effect for care homes in the area that have kind of sucked up those staff, and under better management made better use of those staff to provide better care to the people they were looking after. And pretty much all the all the good work that colleagues over there are doing in terms of improving the workforce as far as skills are concerned, you could say that was captured there in a way that didn't involve anything at all other than people seeking alternative employment with better employers. And I think that's the thing that's coming out. That's some of the, what I heard about some of what colleagues were saying earlier about being a better employer and therefore attracting people that are going to be better to work for you. So that's that. If you are requires improvement, then PAMS is something that you'll be familiar with if you've ever been requires improvement within, not just within Norfolk, but particularly if you're a provider that operates in any of the other eastern counties. PAMS is now used by all 11 local authorities in the east of England, and it is an audit tool. It is based very, very closely on the East of England audit tool which preceded it, and that is linked very closely to, well, if not almost inextricably, in line with the Chloe's. So there's nothing new that you'll see in PAMS that isn't already on Chloe, but we're using these for, we're using PAMS for all providers that are rated requires improvement. We'll go in after a period after their inspection, and we're going to use it positively as an external audit. So if you're a good provider and you're not going to get one of these, I'm sorry, because you kind of deserve one, because if we're providing as a council an external audit for free for providers that are not compliant, then those of you that are good should have at least the same as an external audit that's free, delivered by the council, so that you can have an external view on the way you deliver services. What I'm proposing in terms of restructure that's happening in the commissioning part of the council is a business case to be able to develop my team to give it the capacity to provide that, and I'll give you an update via this meeting as to progress with regards to that, because I think all providers should have the benefit of a PAMS. It is a positive thing. We've conducted, Norfolk's conducted 30 that are published, 30 PAMS that are published at the moment, and in all but one, they've been really positively received. The one provider that didn't like it has now come around to realising actually it was a good thing, because it is supposed to be a supportive mechanism. We're not using it as a stick. We're very much using it as a carrot to assist you as a third pair of eyes, looking at your service to say, look, here's some things that you might have missed in your action plan for CQC or your own internal audits, and it will just direct you to some bits that you might have missed, and that can only be positive in terms of your next CQC inspection. So we really want providers to view it in that way, because we're not using it for providers in this context to review our engagement with you at all. We need you. We need you desperately. We need you to be better desperately as well. So that's what this is about.
What does PAM stand for, sorry?
I knew somebody was going to ask that. It's Provider, okay, so it's Provider Assurance Market Management System. There you go, got it now.
Oh, right, okay.
Provider Assurance Market Management System. So it is, it's an online portal. The work that happens from colleagues in my team is to come out over the course of 2 days, and they will conduct something that looks like a CQC inspection over 2 days, because it covers much the same areas. Then you will receive a report. It's a kind of an exception report really, but it is a report, and you get an opportunity in the same way that you do with CQC reports to do a factual accuracy check on it. We'll amend the report accordingly. You'll come up with a rating at the end against 5 areas I think that are covered in the report. They're not completely aligned with the CQC domains, but the areas covered are the same. And then you get an overall score. That report gets published on the PAMS website, but it's a very synoptic report. I mean, it's literally against each bullet. You know, how have you fared against each bullet point? That's all. There's no real detail in terms of qualitative detail. So that's pretty much it. But it is information that's shared with CQC as well. So when you think about it, that's one good key driver for it being a tool that's used across the piece and not just with providers that requires improvement or non-compliant. The Okay, so that's our piece with that. I should have said, if you've got any questions, please do ask them as we go along, because we'll forget by the end maybe, because I talk quite quickly, believe it or not. So for all the other providers, that's everybody in this room, that's you in that spot there. So a piece of work that I'm doing at the moment that will be finished just the other side of original Brexit is on my team's offer. And it's my team's offer to the council in terms of the way we engage with our colleagues in operations, in commissioning, in procurement, in complaints, but it's also an offer to you because there's a considerable amount of expertise and skill in my team which can be shared with you if you come to us. We can't come to you because we haven't done a PAMS on you, so we don't know what you need, but part of our offer will set out what we can do for you, and we'll also set out how we can signpost you to other areas of expertise that I know you already get from this august organisation that you belong to anyway. But it's just a further resource. So part of the offer, which I think will be, I'm pretty certain that will be published sort of the end of April. You'll see exactly what it is we can do for you, even though we're not coming in and doing an audit at the moment. But it's really important to bear in mind that like I said, we are having a restructure within the commissioning division. So it could be that we have that resource in due course to be able to come out and offer you the support of the panels as well. Okay, so I'm sure everybody's read in great detail that massive report that Steve Holland wrote, with a lot of help, on how we're going to improve the care market in Norfolk by what will be this time next year. And that figure has been quoted, and when I was asked to take on this role in December, that was the only thing they talked about, really. All Norfolk is interested in, as a council, as far as quality assurance is concerned, it's not about what we can do to it, it's about that. It's about that number, and how we're going to get to that number by this time next year. Already, I can tell you, because I was hoping, just a bit of a secret hope, that by Christmas we might be able to get to it sort of December. I started in December and I was thinking, I would get there by Christmas, and no problem at all. But actually, that's not the case. The current figure across all of the regulated care services, so that's nursing homes, residential, domiciliary care, supported living, everything that CQC regulates and inspects, the current figure for good or outstanding in Norfolk is 81.4%. So actually, we're getting closer and closer to it. This time last year, I think it was actually 70 something. So we're getting a lot closer to it. That's on the back of March statistics. So that's the information that CQC can share at the moment. How are we going to do it though? So I've already talked a little bit about how my team are going to be involved in doing that. So this is it. The bit that I told you about already. So those providers that we don't think have the capacity to become good again, and we'll do that by a range of different means. We'll say, right, if you've been inadequate for your last 13 inspections, there's a good chance that you're not going to make it. Or if you've been required improvement for the last 6, there's a good chance you're not going to make it either. But also, if there's providers that have been dipping in and out of compliance, what CQC like to call yo-yo services, then we'll be looking very carefully at those providers to say, do we want to continue commissioning with you really? Is there resource elsewhere? Can we build resource elsewhere to be able to deal with the capacity that would be left? The unmet need that would be left if we stopped working with you. So we're going to do some of this type of work. I'm being hurried up, so I can't take as much as I want to. So this is the key bit. I think this is the key bit because where you might be rated good overall, you may have requires improvement in one of these areas. And statistically speaking, because I've done the maths, services that are rated requires improvement in one of these areas, even if they're good overall, are most likely to fail at their next inspection and become non-compliant. Either requires improvement or, worst case scenario, the other one. But this is where I really want to focus our work from going forward, and that's working with providers that are not meeting this currently, because we've got some really good skill and experience in my team that can support providers through that bit, to give them the good leadership skills, to put processes in place to improve with various techniques how you're dealing with the safe demands. So, and we've got that really quite finitely described at the moment. So that's the piece that we're working on to prevent providers that are currently good becoming not good at their next inspection, mainly because they were probably rated good a couple of years ago. And things can change in a couple of years. You know, you lose a manager, you get a new manager, things can go like that. So we're kind of acute to those sorts of things. I think we work directly with providers that we've identified who are in that kind of risk zone to make sure that we keep that figure up. And this is quite an exciting bit. We're going to employ, in fact, we'll be recruiting shortly to the position of a support manager, who will be a manager, who will be an experienced, registered manager. They won't be registered for this function, but that's their background. And they'll be working for the council, they'll be based in my team, they'll be managed into my team, but they'll be working with providers who need support to help them to achieve compliance if they're not, or to work on selected small pieces of work. It might be around recruitment, it might be around reviewing your policies and procedures, it might be around taking an interest in your care plans, those sorts of things. It's a role that's been defined, but look out, if you're not on Twitter, get on Twitter, because that's how you find out about it. We'll be recruiting for it soon. Who doesn't have a smartphone? Everybody has a smartphone. Who doesn't use Twitter? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You should be using Twitter. Okay. It's easy. I was scared of Twitter about a year ago. I'm a convert. All the stuff that I heard colleagues talking about this morning, I knew about it already, only because of Twitter, I can tell you that. I only look at it for a few moments in the morning, and I tweet something during a conference like this, because he tweeted something, so I acknowledge that. But I'm a convert. I honestly, I don't work for Twitter, I've got no shares, they don't pay me or anything, but you can get distilled information really quickly, as much as you want. You won't get bombarded like that woman if you send her an email, and she'll send you a million emails back. You don't want that. You just want something quite distilled. You can select the content that you want. You can flip through it if you're not interested. But I can tell you, the presentations of the two people that I heard speak this morning, I already knew about, only because I'd seen it on Twitter first. So be ahead of the game and get Twitter, and follow us on Twitter. Okay, topical issues. I'll cover them really quickly because I'm getting like that. So, somebody who's now left to go back to their CQC inspection that's happening today mentioned to me, why can't you just do exactly what CQC done, but mould it together so we don't get multiple inspections? So that is a big piece of work, and it's not a discussion that I haven't had with CQC about how we can try to avoid duplication. But the piece of work that we're doing at the moment around plans is different, it fulfills a different function. It's not reporting in the way that CQC reports, but it does help is critical for the council to review performance against framework, against the framework agreement, mainly because the council doesn't have a contract monitoring function at the moment. I know it did, I've been told it did, it happened before my time, so I know nothing about it. If I can't see the evidence, it didn't exist. So it doesn't happen at the moment, but it's part of what quality assurance team is doing. So that's kind of why we're keeping it separate at the moment. But a conversation has started about how we can share information from a single inspection, if you like, or a single audit across both organisations. That conversation has started, so you'll hear more about it here in due course. So there's a piece of work we're doing also. If you're, are there any providers of supported living in the room? Okay, I won't talk to you about it. Thinking about cutting time here. Okay, here's some really quick bits that if you didn't know about, they were only news to me last week, so I think I wasn't going to mention the B word, but I'm not going to. You can read it, it's there. Medication assurances. So I was with the LPC, that's the Local Pharmaceutical Committee, last week, and you'll be reassured to know, if you were concerned, that there are enough medicines. It's not going to fall over. So we've had really concrete reassurances from the Department of Health and Social Care and others involved in the supply chain for medicines that there is more than adequate provision, irrespective of when or if we Brexit. So please don't have worries about that. We've got that in writing. This is a bit that may impact on you a little bit more potentially, particularly if you're employing staff from overseas. But there is a resettlement scheme around that will ensure that people will be able to stay here as long as they need to. And there's also a very interesting piece in the that, as Kristen's holding up, when you've seen it in there that covers that. So that will give you some assurances in terms of protection of your staff that might be working with you on the other side of Brexit, should it happen. Does everybody get the email? Did everybody get an email from my team about Pharmacy UK? Does anybody not know about Pharmacy UK? We're amongst friends. It's okay to say I have no idea about Pharmacy UK. It's really just to help me understand whether or not those emails are getting to where we do. Everybody's heard of it, great. Okay. So Pharmacy UK is a company that fell over at short notice. There are some lessons to be learned about that because there were various agencies or organisations that knew about the fact that Pharmacy UK was likely to fall over at the tail end of last year. I only found out on Valentine's Day. So on Valentine's Day, I sent that message around as my love to you all, that there's a danger for this company to fall over and that might affect your supply chain for medicines. So if you picked it up on that day, well done. If you picked up the following email that was maybe 2 or 3 weeks later to say, actually it's looking like a reality, you really need to make some alternative arrangements for your pharmacy supply, then well done. If you picked 1 or 2 of them up, then you get bonus points for both of them. But there are some lessons to be learned for a multi-agency piece about how we communicate that better, because it felt like, even though it was a pharmacy issue, it wasn't CCG that picked it up, it came into my team. You got the email the same day that I knew about it. Okay. And there's this. So I don't know if that's covered in the thing you're going to Wayne as well, or maybe somebody else will. But if you haven't participated in the piece of work that was online around the Care Association for Norfolk, you are too late to participate in the survey itself, but you are not too late to comment on the initial findings that have been published. So please do use this opportunity. You've got less than a week. It's like.
Just to say, it's not Community Action Norfolk, it's the Care Association Steering Group. So it's the survey, the findings from the Care Association Steering Group. They are just a member.
Yes. That. So exactly. Well, I just wanted to draw your attention to it anyway. The message is the same, I think, that you've still got an opportunity to comment on the initial findings. So please, exercise your rights because it's something that could be useful to you later. And if you've got a steer in how it happens and some ownership of it, then that would be good for you and good for everybody. Okay. Anybody got any questions? No? Okay. So this is how you can contact us. Tweet, get it. It's really a good thing to have, Twitter. It's really easy. It doesn't expose you to any risk. It really doesn't. You can choose what you get on it. You can get really good and useful information, particularly from that lot and me, my team. People doing it now. Some people are. I can see people reaching for their phone. Great. It's at Quality Norfolk if you're already on Twitter.